morning. My name is Wendy McCristal and I'm the Managing Director of the Mental Wealth Company. And thank you to Ruth and her team up at Liverpool Street Station. We're now coming to you from Derby. We're just overlooking Etches Park Depot and half a mile from the new home of Great British Railways. And whilst bringing together the train and the track into GBR is exciting and full of promise, yet more change can sometimes feel exhausting against a backdrop of constant changes that we're all experiencing in other areas of our lives. Today, we're going to be talking all about handling uncertainty. We're going to be decomposing it all the way from why uncertainty can put some of us on edge, why it affects some people differently, all the way to what we can all do to feel it less. And if we're the ones managing change, how can we help others to feel a bit better about it? I'm going to be taking some questions at the end, so please do pop any thoughts or questions into the question box. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you think about this session. If you're on LinkedIn, please do connect up to the Mental Health Company and let me know later what you take away from this session. I really want to know because we want to keep helping people to thrive at work. But first, I'd like you to imagine this for a moment. You're on an early shift. The route is familiar and it's a journey that you've done many, many times before. You see all the familiar landmarks come and go. You're driving almost automatically. You approach a signal that has always been on green, but today it's red. You come to a halt. No warnings, no explanations, and no updates on how long you'll be waiting. And then the feelings rise up. Your body tenses, your mind starts running scenarios. Why have we been stopped? Am I late? Have I missed something? Perhaps there's an issue up ahead. Is this going to impact the rest of my shift? Will I miss my daughter's show later? Nothing catastrophic or life-threatening is actually happening to you, but everything in you is now on high alert. This is how uncertainty feels. That red signal is what change can feel like for many in the rail industry right now. New rosters, new technologies, new systems and processes, new people, new organisational priorities, AI everywhere, and not enough real information. And here's the important bit. Your reaction to this is not a weakness. It's your competency as a human being. Your nervous system, your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do, to scan for risk, protecting your safety, preparing for the unknown around the corner. The problem isn't that we struggle with change. The problem is that we're living in a state of permanent uncertainty, without the clarity, the support, or the recovery time that our brains and our bodies really need. And it has its consequences. So whilst a little bit of stress helps us to focus in and get the job done, too much stress can cause a significant negative impact to our workplace, our home life, and to our health too. It's impossible to be creative and innovative when we're overwhelmed or triggered by fear. It can lead to disengagement, exhaustion, shutdown, and potentially burnout. So, what can we all do about it? Today, we're going to lean into a little bit of understanding about why uncertainty feels like this and what genuinely helps people to stay well, focused, and safe, even when the signal ahead isn't yet green. So to start with, I'd love to introduce you to a lovely little model called the SCARF model, which is often used when we're working with organisations who are going through change. It was developed by David Rock nearly 20 years ago, and it's great for helping us to understand what helps people to, what happens to people when they experience change. And what David did, he looked at all the research and he looked at all of the types of things that tended to be perceived as threats by the human brain. You may have heard of the fight or flight stress response. This is your body's survival system, and it scans the world looking for threats and responding to help keep us safe. And it's that feeling, when you hear some bad news or you feel that something's threatening, your heart might start to race and you might feel a bit of constriction, a bit anxious here. And it's a really normal and natural thing to happen. But when it's not something that's actually life-threatening, that causes the issue. So let's just have a look at the SCARF model and what it tells us about the types of things that we think are threatening. So let's begin with S for status. For many of us, our identity is attached to our status. And for lots of people, this includes things that we're doing at work. Now, in our caveman days, when our brains evolved, and now to some extent, status is also attached to access to resources. So, for instance, to food or protection. So it kind of makes sense to us that we'd want to know about any changes in status. So let me give you a workplace example. If we are being reorganised and my job title is changing, my immediate kind of scanning of that situation might be, does that mean that I'm going to be paid less? My job title is changing. Well, I have less responsibilities. What's going to happen with that? And if we are in a place of leadership or management of this process, some of the things that we can do to help people to lessen that instinctive threat response is by making sure that we're communicating the changes really clearly and really carefully with as much detail as we can, so that people know what they're going to be up against, I guess. So then let's look at C for certainty. And of course, today, we entitled this session about handling uncertainty. Now, uncertainty causes us stress because if we don't have certainty, we can't plan. We can't use our energy to effectively, because we're going to be running multiple scenarios rather than planning exactly what we're going to be doing. So, for instance, if there is an organisational change, one of the possible scenarios that we might think about is that I might not have a job next year. So we might be thinking then, will I be able to get a mortgage? So again, providing good, clear information about what we do know is going to be really helpful for so many people. And that might sound a little bit like something, here's what's confirmed, this is what we do know, and here's the things that are still undecided. And this is going to be when we're going to update you again. So be really, really clear and kind and give timescales. This really helps people so they know when to circle back and then come look at this again. All right, so on to A for autonomy. Now, autonomy is another word for having control over a situation. What triggers the threat response in our heads is, firstly, being told that changes are happening, and secondly, that we have no option. So again, if this is us and we're managing these situations, it's about the consultation process. It's about giving choice. Involve people in the processes. In my role as a human factors specialist for many years, this was the core about how we got to the best solutions for the quickest. We asked for feedback, sought that feedback, and then brought that bit into our planning processes. And a lot of the time, the people on the ground actually can see the issues before we can. So it's really, really important and very effective way of moving forwards. And you might want to say something like, here are two different ways that we could manage this situation forwards. And I'm really, really interested in your input on what is going to work for you and for the other people that are going through the change. So giving autonomy doesn't mean giving up control. It means involving people in the process. All right, let's go that relatedness, R for relatedness. Now, what triggers the threat response in people here is firstly using a them and us language. Now, if we're in an organisation, we actually have a common goal. So let's try to understand each other's different perspectives from around the organisation so that we can make some decisions about how to move forward. The second thing that we commonly pick up on is leaders disappearing during difficult periods. And it's tricky, isn't it? We've got so much to do and so little time to do it. But the problem with disappearing and that communication which goes with that is people will fill the gaps in for themselves. And we saw earlier how important it was to be giving good, clear information. So what to do in the situation, clear explanations. And secondly, let's look at the power of human connection. I talk about empathy and creating psychologically safe environments a lot in the work that we do. We need visible leadership. We need plain language. Simple things like, we know that this is going to impact you. It's going to impact your home life. Let's talk about what that means to you. So this is where empathy really, really comes into its own. And if we can empathise, if we can just for a moment put ourselves into the shoes of somebody else, this is where relationships form. This is where trust starts. And it's absolutely critical in our safety critical environment that we work in. You can see a different example of this in operations. Imagine you're managing a busy, crowded train full of people. You've got a train which is stopped mid-station in the middle of nowhere. It's dark, nobody can see outside, and there's no information. We know that our passengers get frustrated. They start asking questions. They get angry. They're getting stressed because of this lack of information. And we know that by sharing just simple pieces of information on the PA can really help why the train has been stopped. Maybe a trespasser, maybe a car has been struck on the level crossing. And thinking again about that empathy, the news that nobody wants to hear, that there's been a fatality. The difference that you see in that carriage of people, it shows us that we're all humans. We relate to human stories. All right, so finally, let's look at F for fairness. So this is all about how fair the change feels to us. Is somebody else getting flexibility or additional benefits and you're not? That's the kind of things that tend to come up for people. And I would like to give you an example of where this actually happened to me, where I was working. And we were going through a massive office refurbishment. And a lot of us had, we all started out and we had great big old desks. And for many of you, you'll remember the big old computers we had before we had laptops. So everybody had these great big desks. And I worked in rolling stock design at the time. And with the business was changing out these big old desks and changing them for smaller little desks, which you could put a laptop on, and it fitted okay. And we wanted to fit a few more people into the office. The problem was that on this particular week, people returned into the office and half of the people still had their big old desks, which people really liked because they like having stuff out and their little photographs of their children and everything else. And half of the office had these tiny little desks. And there was uproar because there's a perception of unfairness. So it was a real learning point for the management team. So if you're in this position, the kind of things that we can remember is, it's all about clarifying the changes, why and when they're going to be undertaken, explain any decisions that have been made, go to consultation, and keep remembering to give people timings of what will happen and when. So in that example in the office, the message is all those desks are going to be changed. We're going to be tackling this side first and then this side next week. And everybody's desk is going to be changed the same. So I hope you kind of can see the power of the SCARF model in in helping us just to predict the kinds of things that people might start to feel stressed about in the work that we do. So here's the thing, and the question that I want to talk about a little bit further in. Now, we've talked about work. This is only really a part of the stress that we experience. We only have one brain. There's lots of other places that we're experiencing stress. Stress from our personal lives. My stress this week has been my eldest. He's turned 18 and we had a house full of 18-year-olds on Saturday night. My dog ended up eating birthday cake and there was very nearly a visit to the vets on Sunday morning, as it turned out that the birthday cake didn't agree with our dog at all. But we also have relationships, financial pressures, kids, elderly parents, bereavement, grief, our health. The sources of stress in our personal lives changes over time and can be significant for many people. In the past as well, when our nervous systems evolved, we were reacting to the very immediate stresses around us. Now, if we go and turn on the news or open our phones, we can be faced with images of war, poverty, terrorism, and lots more from all around the globe, being experienced by hundreds of thousands of other people. And whilst it's important for us to know and acknowledge these situations, many are far out of our immediate control. But it's our nervous systems that are reacting to that stress being put in front of us, as well as these other stresses in our lives. And from time to time, that kind of spot, that green star in the middle of that diagram, that stress can feel intense, it can spike, and that's where the problems can really start. And I really want to talk the rest of the session about what we can do about managing that amount of stress that we've got. Now, I made the decision about 6 months ago not to turn on the breakfast news in front of my kids in the morning. It was affecting the stress dose that my family was getting before we'd even started out on our days. And by doing that, we found that we had a little bit more control, a little bit more calm in the mornings. And that was really about the amount of stress that we were experiencing before we started our day. And each day now seems to run a little bit more easy. And just speaking to that stress response, and I know that many of you will have seen the news this morning, that stress response to either a perceived or a real threat, it's, when we were cave people, and that's where we evolved, it would have been to something like, let's say, a tiger or a threatening person. And that stress response would have been experienced for, let's say, 15 minutes a day. But if we're not careful, we can be experiencing stress from all these different places for 15 hours a day, and sometimes for 15 years at a time. No wonder we get sick. It had a profound effect on my life. 8 years ago, this was me. I was experiencing chronic amounts of stress at home, in my personal life. I was an emotional wreck. That constant stress response eventually caught up with me, and I ended up on a long-term sickness. I was off work for 6 months. I really wish that I'd known some of the things that I know now. Because we all feel stress from time to time. And if it's feeling like it's starting to get on top of you, there's going to be many examples over the coming days in Rail Wellbeing Live of different ways to manage your stress. So I really invite you to just, if it's just tuning into 1 or 2 sessions, I've done that in the past, and these are the things that I do now. Those are the things that really make the difference about how I kind of titrate, I meter that stress, I choose the amount of stress that I experience. So one of the things I'd like to share with you, which has been one of the favourite tools that I've picked up over the years, is something that is called the circle of control. And many of you will have seen this before. And the key to learning how to use the circle of control is that we all have a finite amount of energy to spend each day. And I love to use this tool when I feel like I'm spending energy on things that I can't control, so that I can then go and spend it on the things that I can. And I'm going to give you a real life, hot off the press example of this. I realised on Saturday morning that I wanted to make a few adjustments to this slide deck, but the slide deck had been sent diligently to the Rail Wellbeing studio last week. And it was going round and round in my head about the changes that I would have liked to make. And it was consuming my time and my headspace on Saturday morning when I was actually meant to be off work and spending it with my family. And I was really beating myself up about it. And then I caught myself on with it. And I realised it was pointless. I couldn't change the slides at this point in time. And a good friend asked me the question, are they good enough? And I thought, actually, yes, they're good enough. And then I was able to let it go and spent that time instead taking my daughter climbing, which we really enjoyed. And it was much more important than spending hours and hours looping around trying to amend something that in the scheme of things wouldn't have made a massive difference. But it's hard sometimes. So many of us work in safety critical areas that we like to get things perfect. But sometimes we do need to make that call. And if it genuinely is good enough, let it go. And a different example of this from a few years ago, when I was a parent of younger children, I really lent into looking at the kinds of things that I could actually control. So one of the things I used to get really annoyed at, and I was a big advocate of, I used to go to the gym a lot, I used to run a lot. And one of the things that changed fundamentally when I had children was not having enough time for me. And at that point in time, I really had to let go of not having 3 hours a day to go to the gym. But I did instead focus down on the things that I could control. So I could get outside for a quick walk whilst the baby slept. I could control taking offers of support and childcare so that I could pop down to the local Zumba class for 20 minutes. And I could control what I bought at the supermarket so that when I could eat, I was eating really well. So making sure that I'd got something really nutritious in the fridge and ready to go, rather than reaching for the biscuits when I went beyond tired, which we all do from time to time. So learning from that and looking at the way that the SCARF model works, the things that tend to create stress from that unconscious primal part of our brain, we can take some of that and try to avoid triggering that response. And it's not about hiding or changing what we do. It's all about how we do it. And some of that can involve influencing people. And imagine that you'd arrived at that red signal ahead of time. If ahead of time you had been briefed that there'd been some network issues today, you might have told your partner that you might be late home tonight. Your partner might have passed on the news to your daughter, and she might have invited her best friend to see her show if you couldn't make it. Sometimes a little information can go a long way to helping others to plan the detail of their lives ahead. So I'd really urge you, and maybe you might want to take a screenshot or a photograph of the circle of control and just have a think about the things that you could maybe let go of, maybe some of the things that you could influence by sharing a little bit of information or helping somebody talk through something, and then the things that you can control and the things that you can do for yourself. And obviously take a bit of inspiration from Rail Wellbeing Live this week. And as I said to you, people will start to fill the gaps in themselves. So I think I've just missed a slide. There you go. Okay. We talked a little bit earlier about some of the things that we can do to manage change and uncertainty better. So let's just summarise them. So being predictable where possible. Even small little routines can give anchor into that chaos. Give clear timelines, even when the news isn't good. Giving people timelines really, really does help people to keep out of that stress response because they can start planning. Be consistent and reassure. Silences are where people will start to fill the gaps in themselves. And here's one I really like. So leaning into our values as a business, as an organisation, as a decision-making compass. We are really big into keeping people safe. We all have pride in the service that we're giving as the railway, and we all like to look after each other. How can we use that when we're giving, when we're going through change, to help us inform what we say and where we say it? And above all, making time for our team. That threat response that we talked about in the SCARF model, it's primal. It will trigger in people, and giving them the space so that that safe space for them to express, creating psychological safety for them, to be listened to feel heard, is one of the biggest gifts that we can do. And understand that each individual experiences in a slightly different way. We all have slightly different triggers, but fear is contagious. So if we can share information, we really will help a lot. And leaders, it's okay. You don't need all the answers yet to be credible. So yes, people will fill in the gaps themselves, and we know the power that social media has. So anything that we can do out there in terms of our social media platforms, organisations use these because they're all really, really powerful tools. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about being okay. So we talked a little bit about that threat response, didn't we, in terms of seeing something that's threatening. So our caveman brains, seeing a tiger would invoke that stress response, and that would have been for about 15 minutes a day. The rest of the time, our systems are designed to be resting and digesting, and something called the parasympathetic nervous system. It's a different part of the body. If we're experiencing high levels of stress day after day after day, we know that this can lead to other issues. And I remember watching a previous speaker from Rail Wellbeing Live, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and he was talking about the fact that 80 to 90% of GP walk-in issues have a root cause in stress. So, for instance, cardiovascular disease, stomach issues, diabetes. If you look at the root cause of these, the way that stress it causes us to eat differently, it causes different chemical responses in our body. So we can relate a lot of these issues back to our exposure and our reaction to stressful situations. Therefore, it's a really important part of this is about creating space for restoration, for our systems to reset. And however well we are and tooled up to reacting to stress, we need to make sure that we have time in our diaries for looking after you. And if you're a manager or a leader, remember to role model and to support our team. Taking quality time out away from work is as important as getting them to work at work. For me, this looks like I like nothing more than walking outside in the countryside. I've got a dog, so I've got a pretty good excuse to get out there every night. Sometimes I'll put on some music, I'll listen to a podcast, or simply just listening to the sights and the sounds of the countryside. But it might be different for you. For my partner, my husband, he'll disappear into his man cave for a while. It's whatever works for you, that helps to switch off that stress response and gets us back into that rest and digest. And I know there's lots of ideas this week that you can listen into, watch, and adopt into your lives. So I guess to summarise, change is happening all the time, and change to the railway is going to happen. I remember when I joined the railway, about 25 years ago. And at that time we were talking about, what happens if you put Wi-Fi on trains? And I can remember thinking, why would you want to do that? That's when I read books. But imagine if we hadn't embraced that. Imagine if we'd just stopped where we were. We wouldn't have Wi-Fi on our trains. We wouldn't have electric trains. We wouldn't have let women become train drivers. And it wouldn't be the world that we all know and love now. We need to learn to balance out those stresses from each part of our life. We need to recognise when things are getting a bit off track and bring ourselves and make back on track by making sure we're looking after ourselves so that we can manage our stresses effectively. We can only control our own actions. We only have finite energy. Make sure you're spending your energy on the things that are important to you. Uncertainty needs to be acknowledged. It's our primal human response. So let's act accordingly. Let's lean into the lessons from that scarf model. And finally, my invitation to you, I guess, what are the things that you don't, what are the lessons that we can draw out of this? So it's about being clear on what you do and don't know. So maybe if you feel that stress response, that threat response rising in you, a bit of grounding, and there's going to be plenty of people doing grounding this week, being clear on what you do and don't know. Focusing in on what's in your control. And maybe for you it might help to turn off some of those external factors, maybe turning off the news for the day, turning off your notifications on your phone. These are all things that I've done from time to time to help me manage my stress. It might be that you just need to go and have a good coffee and catch up with a friend, maybe go for a walk. And diaring in that recovery time, it's so important, and actually making sure that you do it. I sometimes talk to a friend about this, and we talk about how easy it can sometimes be if you're putting in something into your diary that's for you, a bit of self-care, how easy that can disappear. And we decided that it was the best thing to do is to make sure that it's the most important meeting of the week and making sure that you turn up to it. So finally, my invitation to you is just to have a think about what is one thing that you can do for yourself this week to help yourself manage any of that uncertainty and any of the stresses in your life. And I really want to know what works for you. And finally, as we kind of end this session and go to the Q&A, it brings to mind the Serenity Prayer, which is God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, but the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you so much for spending this session with me. I'd love to answer any questions that you have now. So I'm going to be moving over onto the questions, and I'd love it if you'd connect on LinkedIn and let me know what you're taking away from this session. So I'm going to see what questions we've got coming in. Oh my goodness me, there's a top one, and there's lots and lots of likes on this one. So the first question we've got is, what tools would you recommend for people who feel stuck in what if thinking about the future? Brilliant question. And I can see it's got lots of votes. Now, this is a response that we see an awful lot. And when we're talking about that stress response, And I talked a little bit there, didn't I, about the fact that we have this kind of primal brain. So our brains evolved hundreds of thousands of years ago, and the thing about our brains is it's really focused on the what if, just like your question said there. It likes to scan for the negative, so we have a bias to the thinking of what if. So, and I'm just going to give you a real life example. And I was talking to a friend about this on Friday. What if Rail Wellbeing Live Monday morning goes terribly? And it's a really natural thing for us to do. So, the first thing to do is to write it down, because it makes it kind of a bit more tangible. So, okay, and then to write down what the other options would be. So, Rail Wellbeing Live might go terribly on Monday morning. The other option might be Rail Wellbeing Live might go really well on Monday morning, or it might go mediocre. So we're starting to engage our logical brain, which is in the prefrontal cortex. So this is the kind of the modern bit of the human brain. So we're starting to move away from that primal response, which is there. It's there to save us. It's there to make sure that we survive. And then bring in that more logical, rational part of us. Sometimes it can be helpful to sit down with a good friend when we're doing this, because they can sometimes see that logical bit when we can't, especially if we're in that stress response. I talked a little bit about grounding as well today, and for those of you who don't know, what I'm talking about there is moving our body away from that fight or flight response into the rest and digest, so engaging that parasympathetic nervous system. And if we find ourselves in that what if anxiety state, if you like, it can be really useful sometimes just to do a little bit of grounding practice. The quickest, easiest way that we can do that, if it feels comfortable to us, is to just look around the room. So, and it helps move us out of our head. And if you're game, I'm just going to do a quick grounding practice with you now. So just firstly, feel the ground underneath your feet and the seat. Maybe if you're sitting down, maybe you can just feel it supporting your bottom. And just look around the room for a minute. And I'd like you just to name, either out loud or inside your head, 5 things that you can see in the room. So I'm going to say them out loud, but I can see a microwave, I can see some blinds, I can see my work bag, I can see my blackboard, and I can see Edges Park Depot. The next thing that we can do is then go to 4 things that you can hear. So I can hear a clock ticking, I can hear the air conditioning, I can hear myself talking, and I can hear my knees creaking. And then 3 things that we can feel. So I can feel the table in front of me, I can feel my feet in my shoes, and I can feel the heat of the heater next to me. And then 2 things that we can smell. So I can smell my morning coffee, and I can smell the perfume that I put on this morning. And then finally, 1 thing that we can taste, and I can taste that coffee. And by doing that quick grounding exercise, what we're doing is we're moving out of that sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous system, and it can help just to bring us back into the present. The other quick way that we can do that is through a little bit of breathing practice, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be people doing those this week, but even simply just focusing on our breathing in and out, and just slightly lengthening that out breath can help us just to engage our parasympathetic nervous system. And that will help us to engage our logical brain. And that what if scenario thing, know that that's just your brain trying to keep us safe. So coming back to what are the other possibilities? And as I said to you, I would really suggest that if something that happens to you a lot, something like CBT might help you. So that is looking at those habits, those patterns of thinking, and learning to rewrite them. We have something called neuroplasticity, which means that we can rewire, if you like, the way that our brains help work. So I hope that was useful to you. Let's come on to the next session. Yeah, okay. So this is talking literally about what we're just talking about. So how do you stay grounded and calm when there is so much uncertainty in the world, which requires us to constantly change and adapt while holding on to things quite tightly? So, yeah, great question. And it's about building a habit for me. So even though I teach this stuff, I go into organisations and we teach grounding, we teach a lot of leadership tools, we're still human. And so it's about having a toolkit of things that we can go to, and when we get that awareness, there's a really nice little practice called ABC that a colleague of mine taught me last week, which is if you're feeling a bit icky, if you're feeling a bit stressed, so let's go to A for awareness, and just stopping for a minute and just pausing and having an awareness of how our body is feeling. And that first awareness, I can feel my heart racing. I'm, live. That's a normal thing to happen. But if it was that we'd received an email or that we are just reacting to the news, have that awareness that we're in that stress response to begin with. B for how balanced are we feeling? So just feeling where we are in our bodies. And C, just come back to the core of who we are in that present moment. Just simple little practices like this, just taking a breath, just pausing, coming out of that stress response, and having that be something that we do routinely through the day helps us to keep that perspective that we need. Maybe it's something that you can do when you wake up in the mornings, if you get a chance. It might be something that we can do just to pause and just stop and think about our bodies and how it is when we go and put the kettle on and make a cup of tea. Maybe you can take 5 minutes and just get outside, go and look up at the sky. These little pauses help us to keep perspective. Because when we have kind of these things going around and around in our heads, it's usually because we've become disconnected with where we actually are, where we're present. And when we talked about that scenario with the red light, that's our analogy for, we look at something and we perceive it as a threat. And most of the time when we can get that distance and re-presence ourselves, we realise it's something that's potentially going to affect us, but it's not actually threatening to us right now. So having that habit of pausing through the day can be really helpful. Okay. So next question is, when you're the person that everybody expects to be positive and have all of the answers, I know this one, how do you support others through change when they're actually feeling anxious and uncertain inside? What a great question. And it's exhausting, isn't it? So, because even if you're the person that's, I sometimes talk about this being the mask. We put the mask on and we're turning up for other people, but we're feeling it too. One of the first things that I would go to that situation is empathy. So that of just firstly being able to connect to the other person and being able to communicate, yeah, I'm feeling it too. And that place of combined solace, if you like, can be incredibly powerful. But don't stay there for long. Creating safe spaces for people to talk about their stress can be exhausting. And if you're the one that's feeling anxious and stressed inside, I'd really urge you and invite you to look at your own self-care. Where do you go to talk about what's going on for you? Do you have a good friend who you can talk to about whatever's going on for you, that doesn't judge you for where you are? Getting really conscious about who we've got in our support system, it's really important. But I'd really urge, if that's where you are, go and look at the support that you've got in your life. Really hunker down on getting some good self-care habits in your life. Look after yourself. Anything you can do to get connected, supported by other people, keep moving in your body, and lots of those other self-care things that we're going to be talking in a week. Look at what's going to work for you and making sure that you're getting that time that you need. All right. Okay, next question. How can a team plan for long-term growth when persistent organisational change leaves little room for long-term stability? What a great question. So I think, gosh, that's a toughie. So I wonder whether there's something in here about leaning into the values of your team. So even if we're all going to have change, right? I know that if I invest in tech and IT for my company, in 3 years, it's going to be way obsolete and it's going to have changed again. But I'm buying it for a purpose. I'm buying it to deliver services to my clients. So we've got to lean into what is our overall goal. What are the things, where are the investments going to be that are going to make the biggest difference to the long-term delivery of what you're doing? And sometimes just know that even if we make a decision and we spend money or time or resources or something, and then something changes, there's actually sometimes that's out of our control. We can't predict the future. If we go back a few years, I started a business 6 months before we went into COVID. I couldn't have predicted that, but we adapt, we change, we make decisions. Not all decisions that we make in the moment are going to reveal the results that we want. We can't predict everything. Just to look at them, this morning's news can show you that we can't predict everything that's happening. So sometimes we just have to let some of that go, make the best decision that we can with the information that we've got at the time. Okay, next question that we've got. How do you look after your mental well-being with a manager who doesn't respect your need for support? Great question. I was just talking with somebody this morning about how important it is that actually we get more people understanding the need for support and how support is really helpful for helping us manage our mental well-being. And I guess the question, and I don't know the specifics of that situation, is where else can you get that support from? There's lots of different areas of our life where we can get support. So it might be through our friends and family. It could be through an informal or a formal source. Many organisations have employee assistance programs and many do not. There is also obviously the NHS, and there's many charities out there that offer forms of support that we can access. So I guess the question is about what kind of support do you need, and getting really clear on what that support is for you is a first step. If that support requires you to have time off work, then I would suggest that you reach out to your HR team, because under the duty of care for the business does need to take any of those support needs into account. I hope that helps a little bit. and obviously reach out elsewhere if we can help a little bit more on that. So it's quite complicated without knowing the details. Okay. Do you have any suggested questions to line managers who might be unwilling to disclose information or include you in processes because they're bad communicators? Well, this is exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? So I guess a really great question could be is how much information can you share with me about your timescales right now? There's always going to be situations in things like this. It's, you know, we a lot of us are operating in commercially sensitive organisations. Information can't legally be shared for many different reasons. So a great question would be is what can you share with me and what can't you, and when may we get a little bit more information? I hope that helps. Morning. I think you're going to get this question quite a bit. Why in Network Rail do we talk about mental health and the importance of it? Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, so this is about timing of information. So why do we talk about mental health, but then we get emails that need to be responded to really quickly when we're just about to go off work? Yeah, so this is about timings of important and stressful information, and given when weekends are. So it's a little bit kind of difficult to read this one through. It's quite long. Yeah, so I guess this is one of the things that is very difficult to get right. Communicating information well and with time sensitivity. The person that asked the question actually said, "This is difficult to do, isn't it?" Yes, it is. We're never going to get it right all the time, and I guess one of the things that we can do as leaders is to pre-frame some of this stuff, that there isn't a good time to say this. I'm going to tell you now because I think it's important for you to have the information. And if it's something that, let's say you're sending it out on a Friday and potentially could stress people out over the weekend, a little bit of please park this, please look at this next week, and kind of surrounding that with a bit of expectation what we do and don't want to do with it. All right, I hope that helps. Hi, I'd love to share this presentation with my family. Brilliant. How do I get a copy of the presentation recording? Well, oh goodness me, I'm so sorry. So this person lost a member of their family to suicide. And okay, so first of all, thank you for joining us for the session. And I really do. I'm so sorry you lost your son. This session and all of the other sessions are going to be on demand. I think it's for the next 2 weeks. You can check on the website how long that's for. Yes, I got a thumbs up from the producer. So please do share this recording with your family. Pretty sure there's going to be some sessions during the week on some of the topics that are going to really help you and your family. And thank you for joining us. And I know that there's going to be lots and lots of really helpful resources for you for helping to cope with that grief. Okay. When rumours spread faster than official updates, how should frontline teams protect their mental well-being? Goodness me. I think this is where we've got to come back to what is real information. Somebody the other day said to me that now I don't know how much of this is true, ironically, they said about 50% of what we read online isn't even true and could be, in fact, generated by AI, right? So I would always come back to go and get the proper information before you allow yourself to kind of cascade into that stress response. Go and get the high quality information that you need. Okay. All right. So we've got one on imposter syndrome, something that lots of us know about. How do I mitigate imposter syndrome? Yeah, as this can really undermine confidence and increase the mental load. Yeah, particularly when you're entering a period of organisational change. Yeah, because we're feeling that threat response, aren't we, to our status? And we might have to apply for our own role. Absolutely. Yeah. Musical chairs, organisational musical chairs. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. So what we do know is imposter syndrome is really, really common. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's that little voice inside your head. It's the inner critic that says you're not good enough to do this. And it's the one that starts to create self-doubt, likes to come out in times of stress. And again, if we look at why is it helpful from a human survival point of view? When we have change, it's really helpful in some ways to have something that goes, are you still good at what you do? And I think a really helpful exercise is if you sit down with a good friend and write down 100 things that you are brilliant at doing in your job. It helps to get you out of that triggered, kind of that flooded stress response, and back into do you know what? I'm really good at organising people. I am really good at pulling the team together when they get stressed and getting them to focus on the task in hand. I'm really good at, and as an exercise, keeping that piece of paper on your desk and keeping on adding to it as you do things through the day, you soon get a little bit of evidence that you're good at your job. And being able to keep out of that unhelpful stress response and into the positive version will help you to get your CV sorted and give you the confidence that you need, even when you need to reapply for your own job, which happens to so many people. Okay. Right, my next question is a little bit about growing older. So is it usual to become more risk averse as we grow older, and why? So I don't know the scientific version of that, but from my perspective and having two teenagers, I know that definitely I've become more risk averse to some degree than my teenagers have. I think that from a brain development point of view, teenagers tend to be less risk averse because their brains are telling them to go out and experience the world. And it's that life experience that then starts to give them life lessons. It starts to give them a bit of wisdom, if you like. But I do think that if we're not careful, that we can... that fear can take over a little bit. So I think it's a bit of a game of two sides, that one. So we've had some brilliant questions from the floor there, and I really do hope that you can all take away something from this session. Whatever it is, my invitation to you is find one thing that is going to look after you, look after that stress response, get you back into that rest and digest, and just maybe have a little bit of fun this week. All right. So it's my time to bid you well, and have a great rest of Rail Wellbeing Live, and I'll see many of you soon, I'm sure. Okay. Bye.